Hello, it's Colette from the Sacred Rose Temple. I wanted to talk about emotions as it's something that I have been working with as a healer, as a teacher for many years actually. And it was the one thing that began to change my life as I knew it, having spent years repressing emotion. There's so much I could speak on this topic, but I obviously don't want to bore you all with endless amounts of information about the emotions. But fundamentally, emotions and the release of emotions free us completely from really horrific situations, from shame, from guilt, from anxiety, from depression, from all of those things that we seem to suffer with in society. There's one common factor, and that is that we've all been taught to repress our emotions. It's really difficult being a woman who is deeply an emotional being and to be taught from an early age to repress those emotions. And many of us have that experience, including men, that we're told not to cry, that anger is not good for you, that you shouldn't feel this way and you shouldn't feel that way. And we are taught to button it all up and contain it all inside. And really dependent on where we're brought up as well, culturally, some of us are taught that at even a harsher degree. So, being from the UK, I know that, the English way is to have a stiff upper lip and to compile yourself together at all points. But this is how we get ill, and this is how we become mentally ill too. Life throws us many things as individuals, and on our journey, we all experience different stories, different situations, and each of them will begin to trigger an emotion in us. And for emotional well being, we are meant to actually feel that emotion, express that emotion, allow it to leave the body in whichever way it chooses, and then carry on. Instead, we decide to make ourselves buckets of emotions and we start to pile in the bucket all emotions that we deem as bad, as not necessary, as, weak or as bad. And we just start to compress all these emotions in our bucket and expect that bucket to be okay. But of course, we know that's not the way it is. A fermentation process happens in that bucket and we begin to ferment the emotions and they begin to seek to release themselves. And what happens is that we either become very depressed, we become anxious because we have an overwhelm of emotions wanting to escape all at once. We can explode with emotion because the compression, the fermentation naturally will explode at some point. Or we repress and repress and repress to the point we get very depressed, or the body begins to manifest disease. When I studied Eastern philosophy, disease is the dis-ease of the body. It's the dysregulation of the body, of the nervous system, of the emotive being of a person. And wherever we find an illness, we can go back to an emotional root, to a cause, to a situation, and to a whole bundle of repressed emotions. So take post-traumatic stress, for example. When something so horrific happens to us as a human being, our whole emotional system is unable to cope, and it will cope in the many different ways that we all have to cope with emotions, such as, fight, flight, fawn, or fight, fight, fawn. And those emotions, as well as freeze, are a response that our nervous system does to protect us. It's kind of like the ricochet effect. And once we've come out and we've shook those off, we can come into processing the feeling, the emotion. So for me, fight is a very, natural response to an insult, a conflict, something that I'd sooner not experience. And when I notice myself fighting, arguing or projecting or blaming someone, that might be how it shows itself. I understand that there's an emotion there for me to feel, and that if I feel that emotion, then it will leave me, and I'm actually less likely to put that on someone else, want to project that on someone else. So emotions are really important. And I find that, I do work with clients and with when people in advanced like psychological spaces and spiritual spaces, and still it always comes back always for the inability to emote. And we will always try to find everything we can to prevent the emotion, because we have, in this modern age, attached emotion to a negative space, to so much pain, to so much hurt. And actually, a lot of emotions come, they're fleeting, and once they've been released, they leave our body. I was speaking to the women of my 13 Roses group today and talking to them about anger as a necessity for repairing relationships, and releasing anger and allowing ourselves to process anger really helps our relationships with other people, because if we acknowledge anger in ourselves, we can then do something about it. So for my own self, I will explode. I will punch the punch bag. I will break something. I will scream out. I will growl. I will take a towel. All the practices that I've been taught to use to release that anger. And therefore, it really helps me authentically relate with those around me, instead of projecting all the anger that I hold upon them, which will eventually erupt and pour onto them. So I just wanted to revisit here really, and talk to you all about the necessity, about the importance of emotions, and just to check yourself where you think one emotion is good and one's bad. That's not true of any emotion. They are just emotions. And where you hold back emotions and why you do that. What has structured your life? What has imprinted itself upon you to feel that being emotional is not okay? And if you do repress emotion, and we all do, how does that eventually ferment, explode, or cause you mental health problems such as anxiety and depression, or disease in the body? So I want to leave you with that thought as I sit and feel into, sharing a deeper workshop space to work with emotional well-being that might support people who recognize that they are not dealing with emotions, that they are not releasing emotions, and that they are fermenting, erupting, and often being taken down by them. So I hope this has helped in some way understand how emotions can wreak havoc through the body, and to just catch yourself when you feel something and you try to repress it through pushing it down, going shopping, being busy, drinking that glass of wine, or taking those drugs, or watching TV, and all the other methods that we take in order to disconnect from our emotional self. So, as always, I am sending you healing love and blessings. Bye for now.